The year was 2387. Humanity had been a member of the Galactic Coalition for exactly 42 years. 42 years of proving themselves. 42 years of sitting at the bottom of the council table, nodding politely while species who had been sailing the stars for thousands of years talked down to them like children who had just learned to walk. And humans being humans had gotten used to it. Not because they were weak. Not because they didn't have pride. But because humans understood something that most alien species didn't. That patience is not the same as weakness. That silence is not the same as surrender. That a slow burn is still a burn. The Galactic Coalition was made up of 11 species. The Vreth, tall, silver-skinned, and terrifyingly fast in battle. The Orokai, ancient, cold, and brilliant beyond measure. The Dendari, plant-based creatures who could survive in the vacuum of space without a suit. And 7 others, each with their gifts, their own warships, and their own legends. Humanity had one thing none of them had: stubbornness. And one ship that perfectly represented that stubbornness. The USS Kero. The Kero was a Titan-class human warship, a massive, ugly, brutally built machine of war that had rolled off the docks of the new Chicago shipyard in 2371. She was not quick. She was not elegant. She was not pretty. She looked like someone had taken a mountain, bolted engines to it, wrapped it in 6 feet of solid composite armor plating, and called it a spaceship. She was slow, painfully slow. Her top speed was 0.18 light speed, barely a crawl compared to the Vreth's sleek destroyers that could hit 0.6 without breaking a sweat. It took her 4 full minutes to complete a standard combat turn. Her weapons took 40 seconds to charge. She had no cloaking device, no phase shields. She didn't have the elegant energy deflection barriers that the Orokai used. What she had was armor. And guns. And a crew of 3,200 human beings who had heard every joke in the galaxy about their ship had collectively decided not to care. Her captain was a man named Commander Danny Hale. Danny Hale was 47 years old. He had a scar that ran from his left ear down to his jaw, a souvenir from a debris impact on his first posting. He had gray at his temples, laugh lines around his eyes, and the kind of calm in his voice that only came from a man who had already seen the worst the universe had to offer and had chosen to show up anyway. He had been commanding the Kero for 6 years. He loved her like she was a living thing. The mockery had started almost immediately after Kero's first joint exercise with a coalition fleet. The exercise was called Operation Crossfire, a simulated multi-fleet assault on a decommissioned asteroid base in the Kalan system. Every coalition species had sent their finest warship. The Vreth sent the Silver Strike, a long, razor-thin destroyer that moved through space like a thrown knife. The Orokai sent the Eternal Patience, a ship so advanced that half its systems were still classified even to coalition allies. The Dendari sent the Rootbound, a living vessel, grown rather than built, capable of repairing its hull in real time. And humanity sent the Kero. When the Kero entered the formation, the coalition comm channels went quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Then the Vreth fleet commander, Admiral Sailvrex, said something in his own language that the translator rendered as, "Is that a ship or a building that got lost?" The laughter that followed crossed 6 different species and 4 different languages. Danny Hale heard every word of it from his command chair. He set down his coffee, real coffee, grown in the hydroponic bay on Deck 14, and said nothing. Around him, his bridge crew tensed. His first officer, Lieutenant Commander Sophia Reyes, gripped the railing of her console. "Sir," she said quietly.
"I heard it," Danny said.
"Your orders?" Danny picked his coffee back up. "Hold formation. Maintain speed. Stay the course." Sophia looked at him for a moment. Then she nodded.
"Aye, sir."
The exercise began. The faster ships, the Silver Strike and the Orokai's Eternal Patience, darted forward at incredible speed, engaging the simulated enemy drones around the asteroid base with precision and elegance. The Kero moved at her own pace, steady and deliberate, reaching the engagement zone a full 9 minutes after everyone else. By then, the exercise was mostly over. The coalition's after-action report ranked the Kero last in combat effectiveness. Dead last. Below was a Dendari support frigate that wasn't even a frontline ship. The official note in the report read, "U.S. Kero, insufficient speed and maneuverability for frontline engagement. Recommend reassignment to supply escort or rearguard duty." Admiral Salvrex personally forwarded the report to the Human Coalition representative with a single added line. Perhaps humanity should focus on building faster ships rather than larger ones. Danny read the report in his quarters that night. He read it twice. Then he folded it neatly, set it on his desk, and pulled out a blank piece of paper, real paper, which he kept for moments like this, and wrote one sentence. SYMJHY, from this moment forward, we prove them wrong. He pinned it to the wall above his desk. He went to sleep. The Kero had 3,200 souls aboard. Not soldiers. Not just soldiers, anyway.
People.
People with histories, habits, inside jokes, favorite foods from the mess hall, and small photographs pinned above their bunks. People who had chosen, for reasons as varied as the stars, to serve aboard the slowest, most mocked warship in the known galaxy. At 53 years old, Chief Engineer Marcus Webb, who resembled a doorframe, had been maintaining the Kero's engines since her launch. He talked to the ship's reactor the way some people talk to pets. He called her old girl. He had turned down 3 promotion offers that would have moved him off the Kero because, as he told Danny once, she needs someone who understands her. You can't hand her off to someone who doesn't know she runs hot on the port side when she's been pushed past 0.15. Weapons Officer Lieutenant Priya Nair was 31. She had scored in the top 3% of the Coalition's combined weapons qualification exam, not the human exam, but the combined exam that all 11 species took together. She had scored higher than any Vreth candidate in the past decade. The Vreth weapons commander had asked to see her scores again, convinced there had been an error. There had been no error. Priya was the reason the Kero's main guns hit what they aimed at 97.3% of the time. She had spent 4 years refining the targeting algorithms herself, working on her off hours, because the standard Coalition targeting software wasn't good enough for her. She didn't talk about her work. She just did it. Chief Medical Officer Dr. James Okafor was 44 and had seen more combat injuries than most battlefield surgeons twice his age. He was soft-spoken and methodical and had a habit of humming old Earth songs while he worked. His medical bay had the lowest post-injury mortality rate in the entire Coalition fleet, not just the human fleet, but the entire Coalition fleet. The Orokai had actually requested a copy of his triage protocols. He had sent them over without asking for anything in return. Navigator Ensign Lena Park was 26 and had joined the Kero straight out of the Coalition Naval Academy. She had been top of her class. She had received offers from 3 different species fleets, including a very prestigious offer from the Orokai, who almost never recruited outside their own species. She had turned them all down to serve on the Kero. When asked why, she said simply, "Because everyone's counting them out. I want to be there when they're wrong." Communications Officer Sergeant Ray Dominguez was 38 and had the ability to track, translate, and decode 17 different alien communication systems simultaneously. He could read the sub-frequency chatter of a Vreth battle formation before their own junior officers knew what orders were coming. This skill had saved Kero's life twice already, though the official record didn't say so because the reports had been filed in ways that made the saves look routine. These were the people of the Kero. Every one of them had heard the jokes. Every one of them had read the reports. Every one of them had seen the way Coalition officers looked at their ship, with a mixture of pity and mild amusement, the way you might look at a dog trying to run a race with horses. And every single one of them had made the same quiet decision that Danny Hale had made. SYMJHY. From this moment forward, we proved them wrong. The Coalition fleet was stationed at Waypoint Station Orin, a massive orbital platform in the neutral zone between the Vreth and Dendari territories. It served as the central hub for all Coalition military operations, and it was here that the various species crews mingled, trained, competed, and, frequently, insulted each other in creative ways that were technically within regulations. The Kero's crew had a reputation at Waypoint Orin. The other crews called them the tourists. As in, the humans on the slow ship, who would always arrive late to any fight and leave having missed it. The joke had made its way into coalition military humor with impressive speed. There was a card game popular among Vreth soldiers called Waiting for the Kero. The point of the game was to hold your hand as long as possible without doing anything. The longer you waited, the better. The first one to act lost. Danny had heard about the game. He had said nothing. Marcus had heard about the game. He had gone to the Vreth barracks and challenged their best player. He had won. He had collected his winnings, a bottle of Vreth fermented grain alcohol that tasted like burning copper, and walked back to the Kero without saying a word. The Vreth soldiers had stared after him in confused silence. Marcus had said, over his shoulder, just before the door closed behind him, "Turns out humans are pretty good at waiting too." It was on a Tuesday, stardate 2387.114, which happened to correspond with a Tuesday on Earth's calendar, a coincidence that the crew of the Kero found deeply funny, that everything changed. Ray Dominguez was running a routine scan of coalition comm traffic when he caught something that wasn't routine at all. It was a faint signal, buried under 3 layers of encryption, coming from deep in the Kalen sector, the same sector where the joint exercise had taken place 2 months before. Ray didn't panic. He never panicked. He leaned forward, adjusted his headset, and spent 22 minutes carefully pulling the signal apart layer by layer the way you might peel something very delicate without tearing it. When he finally got to the core of the signal, he sat very still for a moment. Then, he pressed his comm. "Captain Hale," he said quietly, "you need to come to the communications deck. Now, sir. And, sir, don't say anything over the open channel about why." Danny arrived 4 minutes later, coffee in hand. Ray played him the decoded signal. Danny listened without moving. When it finished, he set his coffee down very slowly on Ray's console. The signal was a Vreth military coordination frequency. And it was not sent to Coalition Command. It was sending away from it. The signal Ray had found was 23 seconds long. In those 23 seconds, it contained enough information to change the course of the war that, as of that morning, humanity hadn't even known was coming. Danny listened to it twice. His face didn't move. His expression didn't change. This was something his crew had noted about him since his first day on the Kero. Danny Hale's face was, in moments of genuine crisis, completely still. Not frozen. Not blank. Still. Like deep water. Like something that had made peace with its own depth. When the signal finished the second time, he turned to Ray. "Who else has heard this?" "Just me, sir. And now you." "Does Coalition Command show any flag on this frequency?" Ray shook his head slowly. "No, sir. The frequency is listed as inactive in Coalition records. Decommissioned in 2379. Someone removed it from active monitoring 8 years ago." Danny was quiet for a moment. "So, no one else in the fleet is listening to it?" "No, sir." Ray paused. "Except us. Because I run full-spectrum scans, not just the Coalition-approved monitoring list," he said this without pride. "Just as a fact." Danny nodded once. He picked up his coffee. He said, "Get Sophia. Get Priya. Get Marcus. My briefing room. 20 minutes. Tell no one else." Ray nodded. "Aye, sir." 20 minutes later, in the small briefing room off the main bridge, Danny played the signal for his senior officers. The signal, once fully decoded, was a tactical coordination message between 3 Vreth military commanders. Not Coalition Vreth. Not the Vreth forces assigned to joint operations. Independent Vreth military commanders, operating outside Coalition authority. The message outlined the following. In 11 days, a Vreth strike force of 47 warships would cross into the Kalen sector and attack Waypoint Station Orin, the Coalition's central hub. The attack was designed to look like a Dendari aggression, false flag markings, spoofed Dendari weapon signatures, and doctored identification codes. The goal was not just to destroy Orin. The goal was to frame the Dendari for it, triggering a war between the Vreth and the Dendari that would tear the Coalition apart from the inside. The Vreth commanders believed that a fractured coalition was worth more to them than a united one. The Vreth had been quietly frustrated with coalition politics for years, The Orokai held too much influence, humanity was growing too fast, and the Vreth, despite being the fastest military force in the galaxy, felt they were not being given the power they deserved. So they had decided to burn it all down and rebuild the galaxy around themselves. The signal ended. The briefing room was silent. Sophia spoke first. 47 ships. Yes, Danny said. Against Oren's current defensive garrison of 9 coalition vessels. Sophia pressed her lips together. They'll tear right through it. Yes, Danny said again. We need to go to coalition command immediately, Priya said. Her voice was controlled, but her hands were flat on the table, the thing she did when she was keeping herself from showing how angry she was. This move is an act of war against the coalition, by a coalition member. If we go to coalition command, Marcus said slowly, and the Vreth have people inside, which, given that they removed this frequency from monitoring 8 years ago, they clearly do, then the warning gets intercepted. And then we've lost our only advantage, which is that they don't know what we know. Silence. Danny looked around the table. There's something else, Ray said. He pulled up a second display. The strike formation they're using, 47 ships converging from 3 vectors, there's a gap in it. A deliberate gap. Here. He pointed to a section of the tactical map. It's too clean to be an accident. Someone in the Vreth command structure designed this formation with a specific weakness built in. A trap? Sophia asked. Or an invitation? Ray said quietly. Everyone looked at him. The gap is positioned at exactly the point where a ship coming from the direction of Waypoint Oren's current coalition fleet position would enter the engagement zone. Ray looked at Danny. A ship moving at low speed. Taking the long route. The route nobody would think to watch. More silence. Marcus looked at Danny. You're thinking what I think you're thinking. Danny said nothing for a long moment. Then he said, HFY. Sophia looked at him. Sir? We don't go to coalition command, Danny said. Not through official channels, not yet. Because Ray is right, there are Vreth operatives inside.
We go ourselves.
We take the Kero, we move now, we take the long route that nobody is watching, and we reach Oren before the strike force does. And then he paused. Then we figure out how to hold off 47 warships with 1 slow ship until the rest of the coalition can respond. The room was hushed. Then Marcus said, I can push her to 0.19 light speed if I bypass the secondary cooling regulators and redistribute power from the non-essential decks.
Do it, Danny said.
Priya said, I've been running simulations for the past 3 years on a sustained multi-target engagement scenario. I never thought I'd actually use them.
You're using them now, Danny said.
Sophia said, we'll need to go dark. No coalition transponder signal. No comms out. If the Vreth have people monitoring coalition traffic, a sudden burst of activity from us tips them off. Agreed, Danny said. We go dark the moment we leave Oren's communication shadow. He stood up. One more thing, he said. He looked at each of them, Sophia, Ray, Priya, and Marcus, in turn. I need to be honest with you. This mission is likely the most dangerous thing this ship has ever attempted. We are the slowest vessel in the fleet. We have no cloaking, no phase shields. We will be going, alone, into the path of 47 Vreth warships. Silence. I need to know you're with me, not because I'm ordering you, but because you believe in what we're doing. Sophia stood up. I've been on this ship for 6 years, she said. I'm not leaving now. Marcus stood. She operates at a high temperature on the port side. Someone's got to watch her. Priya stood. I have simulations to run. Ray stood last. He was the youngest of them at the senior level. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, They called us tourists, sir. I'd like to show them what tourists do when things get serious. Danny looked at them all. He almost smiled. Get to your stations, he said. We leave in 2 hours. The Kero left Waypoint Station Oren at 0340 station time, under the cover of a routine resupply rotation that Sophia had quietly arranged through logistics channels so mundane that no one would look twice. A slow ship on a slow errand. Nothing to see. The duty officer at Oren's traffic control logged the departure with barely a glance. A note in the system. Yes, Kero. Standard patrol rotation. Kalen sector perimeter. Scheduled return, 14 days. The Kero moved out of the station's communication shadow at a steady, completely unremarkable 0.14 light speed. And then Marcus did something to the engines that was technically outside operational parameters, and the Kero quietly, without any external announcement, pushed to 0.19. Not fast by coalition standards. Still the slowest major warship in the fleet. But 0.19 was the difference between arriving 2 days after the Vreth strike force and arriving 3 days before it. 3 days. Danny intended to use every second. The moment they crossed into deep space and the station sensors were too far behind them to track accurately, Danny gave the order. Go dark. It happened in stages. Ray powered down the coalition transponder, the signal that broadcast Kero's identity to every ship and station in range. Then, he began systematically switching off every non-essential communication antenna. Then the navigation beacons. Then, finally, the deep space comm array that linked them to Coalition Command. The bridge went noticeably quieter without all those systems running. It was a strange feeling, like the ship had taken a breath and held it. We're invisible, Ray said. Technically, we don't exist right now.
Good, Danny said.
Coalition Command will notice our transponder is gone within 6 hours, Sophia said.
I know, Danny said.
By then, we'll be too far out for them to recall us without making enough comm traffic to tip off the Vreth. You're gambling that the Vreth won't have time to change their plans. I'm gambling on 11 days of planning and a formation with a gap in it, Danny said. Ray's right. That gap is an invitation. Someone inside the Vreth command structure doesn't want this attack to succeed. Or it's a trap, Sophia said. Could be both, Danny acknowledged. We proceed anyway. On day 2, Lena Park came to Danny's quarters with her navigation charts. Lena was 26 and had barely spoken to Danny directly in the 6 months she'd been aboard. She was precise, professional, and slightly afraid of him, as people sometimes are of someone they deeply respect. She spread her charts on his desk. I've been running the approach vectors, she said. If we come in on the standard route, even going dark, a Vreth forward scout will detect our mass displacement at approximately $0.80 from Oran. The distance is too great for our weapons to be effective. We'd be engaged before we could do anything. Danny studied the charts. And the non-standard route? She pointed.
Here.
The Kalen Drift. It's a band of high-density particle debris that runs along the southern edge of the Kalen sector. It plays hell with sensors. Nobody uses it for navigation because the particle density causes micro-impacts on hull plating, and standard ships would accumulate significant damage over a sustained transit. Danny looked at her. Standard ships. A small, careful smile crossed Lena's face. The Kero has 6 feet of composite armor plating, sir. The micro-impacts would be completely negligible to us. We're too well-armored to care. Danny looked at the charts. The Kalen Drift ran right through the gap in the Vreth formation. The gap in the Vreth formation. He looked up at Lena. You know what you're proposing, he said. You're saying the Kero's armor isn't just a defense against enemy fire. It's a navigation tool. Yes, sir, Lena said. The very thing they mock us for is the thing that lets us go where they can't follow. Danny looked at the chart for a long time. Then he said, Kero. Lena blinked. Sir?
The ship, Danny said.
I named her in my head the first day I stepped aboard her. Kero. It's from an old Earth word. It means to persist. To keep going when everything else stops.
He paused.
Set the course for the Kalen Drift, Ensign Park. Lena stood up straight.
Aye, sir.
The Kalen Drift was beautiful, in the terrifying way that space has of being beautiful. It was a river of silver and gold, billions of tiny particles catching the distant light of the Kalen system's twin stars, creating a shifting, shimmering curtain that extended for thousands of kilometers in every direction. From the Kero's forward observation ports, it looked like sailing through the inside of a thundercloud made of light. The impacts on the hull were constant, a low, deep drumming like rain on a metal roof that could be felt through the deck plating. Soft enough that you stopped noticing it after the first hour. To the Kero, it was nothing. To any other ship in the Coalition fleet, it would have been a death sentence. Marcus stood in engineering with his hand on the whole monitoring panel, feeling the micro-impacts and smiling. "Come on, old girl," he said softly. "Show them what you're made of." The Kero pushed through the drift at 0.19 light speed, steady and unhurried, and absolutely unstoppable, leaving a clean trail through the particles that closed behind her like water. Invisible, untrackable, moving through the one place in the sector that nobody else could go. Ray, on the communications deck, was monitoring passive sensor returns, listening without broadcasting, pulling in every signal in range with the patience and precision that had made him the best signals officer in the human fleet. On day 3 in the drift, he heard the Vreth advance scouts. 12 ships, spreading through the Kalen sector in a search pattern, looking for coalition activity, looking for any sign that their plan had been compromised. Ray tracked them silently, plotting their positions on his console, watching the pattern of their search. They never looked into the drift. Of course they didn't. The drift would destroy any ship that tried to enter it. Any ship except the one nobody took seriously. Ray allowed himself a tiny smile. He kept listening. They emerged from the Kalen drift on day 4, battered by particles but entirely unharmed, and there before them was Waypoint Station Orin, the Coalition's heart, its hub, its nerve center, gleaming in the light of a distant sun, completely unaware of what was coming for it. And there, anchored in defensive formation around it, were 9 Coalition warships.
9.
Against 47. Danny stood at the forward observation port and looked at the station for a long time. Beside him, Sophia said quietly, "We have 7 days before the Vreth strike force arrives." 7 days, Danny said. "What do we do with 7 days?" Danny turned away from the port. "First, we establish contact with Orin Command. Secure channel only. We need to brief the station commander on what's coming." "And the Coalition Command?" Sophia asked. "Do we break silence?" Danny thought for a moment. "We send one message. The message is encrypted at the highest level available to us. To Admiral Chun, the human fleet admiral. No one else. Chun is not Vreth. I have no reason to doubt Chun's loyalty." He paused. "We tell her everything. We tell her where we are, what we found, and what's coming. And then we tell her that by the time her reinforcements arrive, we'll have either held this station or died trying." Sophia was quiet. "Sophia," Danny said. "Sir, I need you to trust me on this." She looked at him directly. "I do, sir. She stopped. "Say it. I just want to make sure you understand what you're asking of 3,200 people." Danny held her gaze. "I understand exactly what I'm asking." He didn't look away. "And I wouldn't be asking if I thought there was another way." Sophia held his gaze for a moment longer. Then she nodded. "I'll draft the message to Admiral Chun." The station commander at Orin was Commodore Elena Vasquez, a compact, sharp-eyed woman of 60 who had been running the station for 12 years and had seen enough of the galaxy to know that when a human warship appeared out of nowhere on a secure channel and said, "We need to talk quietly," you listened. She listened. When Danny finished his briefing, there was a long silence on the channel. Then Vasquez said, "You're telling me 47 Vreth warships are going to come through that sector in 7 days?" "Yes, Commodore. And you found this out because your comms officer runs full-spectrum scans on a decommissioned frequency?" "Yes, Commodore." Another pause. "And you came through the Kalen drift?" "Yes, Commodore." The pause this time was longer. "In that ship?" "Yes, Commodore." Vasquez made a sound that might have been a laugh, might have been disbelief, or might have been both. "Commander Hale, you are either the most prepared officer I've ever spoken to, or the most reckless." "Possibly both, Commodore." "What do you need from me?" 7 days to prepare, Danny said. "And your complete silence on this outside of your most trusted staff. If the Vreth have informants in the Coalition, and we believe they do, any broad communication about this will reach them within hours." "Understood," Vasquez said. Her voice had changed. The initial shock was gone, replaced by something solid and decisive. 12 years of running the Coalition's most important station had given her a certain quality of rapid adaptation. I have 9 ships and a station with defensive weaponry that hasn't been tested in 2 years.
Test it, Danny said.
Quietly. Frame it as routine maintenance.
Done.
A pause. And the Kero? The Kero, Danny said, is going to be positioned here. He transmitted the coordinates, the gap in the Vreth formation, in the one place their formation doesn't cover. Vasquez studied the coordinates. That's directly in the path of the strike force's center column. Yes, Commodore. If they adjust formation, they won't know we're there until we open fire, Danny said. We're coming through the drift again. We'll be inside their formation before they can adapt. Silence. Commander, Vasquez said. I want you to understand something. If this works, if we hold this station, it will be because of you. And I will make sure that is on the record. With respect, Commodore, Danny said, if this works, it will be due to this ship and this crew. The record can say whatever it likes. 7 days. They used every one of them. Priya ran her engagement simulations around the clock, feeding new data into the targeting systems every time she found an optimization. She hadn't slept more than 4 hours in any given night since they left Orin the first time. She ran on coffee and controlled fury. Marcus stripped the Kero's weapon systems down to their base components and rebuilt them optimized for sustained multi-target engagement. Normal ships, swift ships, fought in bursts. Quick strikes, dash away, recharge, return. The Kero couldn't dash. The Kero couldn't retreat. So Marcus redesigned the power distribution to favor sustained, continuous weapons fire over peak burst damage. The Kero would not hit the hardest of any ship in the fight, but the Kero would keep hitting long after every other ship had been forced to fall back and recharge. Lena Park charted and recharted the re-entry route through the Kalen Drift, calculating the exact trajectory that would bring them out inside the Vreth formation at the precise moment the battle began, moving at the exact angle that would make the most effective use of the gap. Ray Dominguez monitored every Vreth signal in the sector, building a complete picture of the incoming strike force, 47 ships, their commanders, their formation patterns, and their communication habits. He built a signal intelligence profile so detailed that he could predict, with roughly 80% accuracy, what order each Vreth commander would give in the first 5 minutes of the engagement. He shared this with Priya, who incorporated it into her targeting algorithms. And Danny Hale walked his ship. Every day of those 7 days, he walked every deck of the Kero. Not inspecting, not checking, just walking, stopping to talk to people. Not about the battle, about their families, their home cities, their favorite things from the mess hall, the book someone was reading, and the card game someone was winning. He knew the names of people on decks that were never visited. He knew the name of the ensign who ran the laundry facility on deck 22 and the petty officer who grew herbs in a small planter next to the recycling bay. He walked and he talked, and he made sure that every single person on his ship knew that he saw them. He was asking them to stand in the path of 47 warships. The least he could do was know their names. On the 6th night, Sophia found him at the forward observation port again. She brought 2 cups of coffee from the officer's mess and handed him one without asking. They stood in silence for a while, looking at the stars. "Are you afraid?" she asked. Danny considered the question. "Yes," he said. "Of dying?" "Of failing," he said. "Of asking these people to do something extraordinary and then not being good enough to make it count." Sophia looked at her coffee. "You know what I think. Tell me." "I believe that the fear of failing those who trust you is precisely what prevents you from failing them."
She paused.
"I've served under captains who weren't afraid of anything. They were terrifying in a different way." Danny almost smiled. "One more day," he said. "One more day," she agreed. They stood together in the silence of the ship, in the dark between stars, and they waited.
Kero, persist.
The Vreth strike force arrived on schedule. Day 11. 0600 station time. Exactly as the decoded signal had said. 47 warships came out of faster-than-light travel in a wide crescent shape as they approached the Kalen sector, shiny, silver-colored, and extremely fast, and started moving toward Waypoint Station Orin in a well-practiced formation. They were broadcasting false Dendari identification codes as planned. Their weapons were charging. Their formation was tight and disciplined, and they were confident. They had no idea what was waiting for them inside the Kalen drift. The Kero had entered the drift 8 hours before the Vreth arrived. She was positioned just inside the debris field, engines at minimum power, all non-essential systems dark, sitting completely still in the swirling silver particles. From outside, she was invisible, her sensor profile entirely buried under the drift's electromagnetic interference, her hull perfectly matched to the background scatter. On the bridge, everyone was quiet. Danny sat in his command chair. His face was still. His coffee was untouched. He'd made it out of habit and then forgotten it. Priya was at her weapons console. All 42 of the Kero's primary weapon arrays were charged and locked. She had targets already selected and prioritized. 42 targets. 1 for each gun. She had worked out, down to the second, the optimal firing sequence for maximum disruption of the Vreth formation. Lena was at navigation, watching the Vreth ships move on passive sensors, tracking the gap, as it opened exactly where the decoded signal had predicted it would. Ray was listening to the Vreth battle comms with perfect concentration, his hands moving silently over his console, tagging and timestamping every signal. Marcus was in engineering, one hand on the power distribution board, ready to channel every joule the Kero's reactor produced into weapons and shields on command. Sophia stood at her console, calm as deep water. The Vreth formation moved closer. The gap aligned. Danny watched the sensor display. He waited.
Kero, wait.
The gap was perfect. The angle was perfect. The Vreth formation was moving exactly as the signal had predicted, exactly as Lena had calculated. Danny said quietly, "All hands, this is the captain." His voice went out over every speaker on the deck of the ship. "We are about to embark on an unprecedented journey. A slow ship, going where fast ships couldn't follow, arriving where no one expected her, fighting for people she was told she wasn't good enough to protect."
A breath.
"I am proud of every single one of you. Whatever happens next, that doesn't change." He set down his coffee. "Lieutenant Nair," he said. "Fire." The Kero came out of the Kalen drift like a falling mountain. She was not quick. She did not streak or dart or flash. She moved the way she always did, steady, deliberate, and absolutely unstoppable, directly through the gap in the Vreth formation, into the center of their strike force, and she opened up with every gun she had. 42 weapon arrays.
Sustained fire.
Priya's targeting algorithms are running at 97.3% accuracy. The first volley hit 11 Vreth warships simultaneously. The Vreth strike force, which had been in perfect formation a moment before, exploded into chaos. Nothing in Vreth tactical doctrine covered this scenario. Their fast ships were built to fight fast ships, to engage at range, make rapid passes, and use speed and maneuverability to stay out of the sustained fire envelope. Every tactic they had was built around the assumption that the enemy would also try to move quickly, to avoid being stationary, and to not sit in one place and absorb incoming fire while returning it without pause. The Kero didn't move quickly. The Kero moved at 0.19 light speed, steadily, right through the middle of them, taking hits that would have destroyed lighter ships and barely showing it, and returning fire continuously, not in bursts, not in passes, but in a sustained, relentless wall of weapons fire that didn't stop because the Kero's power distribution had been rebuilt by Marcus Webb to do one thing above all others.
Keep
firing. The Vretha's fastest ships tried to dart away, regroup, and make attack runs. That was their doctrine. Flash in, hit hard, then flash out. And they hit the Kero hard. No question about it. The first serious impact rocked the bridge. Deck 7 reported a breach, sealed automatically. Deck 12 took a hit to the secondary power relay. Marcus rerouted in 40 seconds. The forward sensor array took a glancing blow and went to 60% capacity. The Kero kept firing. The second wave of Vreth attack runs was heavier. The Kero took impacts on the upper hull, the port weapons cluster, and the forward shield emitters. The Kero kept firing. On the bridge, Danny watched the damage reports come in with the same stillness he brought to everything. Damage to Deck 7, seal it. Reroute power from secondary systems. Keep the guns up. His voice never rose. He gave orders the way the Kero moved, steady, deliberate, without panic. His crew responded the same way, because they were the Kero's crew. And Kero meant persist. In the chaos of the engagement, something remarkable happened. The 9 coalition warships at Waypoint Station Orin, warned, prepared, and positioned exactly as Vasquez had arranged in the past 7 days, came in from 3 vectors and hit the Vreth formation from the outside. The Vreth were now fighting on 2 fronts. 47 ships that had expected to engage 9 enemy vessels at leisure now found themselves squeezed between Orin's defenders and a single indestructible human warship that had appeared from nowhere in the heart of their formation and was methodically dismantling their command structure 1 ship at a time. Priya had prioritized command and communications ships, the vessels that coordinated the formation, that carried the orders that kept 47 ships operating as one. As each one went dark, the Vreth formation fragmented a little more. Individual ships, cut off from central coordination, began making independent decisions, some aggressive, some cautious, and the beautiful, disciplined crescent formation that had been rehearsed in 100 Vreth private simulations began to come apart. Ray, monitoring the Vreth comms, heard the moment it happened, heard the frantic back and forth between Vreth commanders trying to re-establish coordination, heard the confusion and disbelief bleeding through even the professional discipline of their communications. He heard one Vreth commander say something that the translator rendered as, "What is that thing? Why won't it stop?" Ray allowed himself 1 full second of a massive smile. Then he got back to work. The battle lasted 4 hours and 17 minutes. 4 hours and 17 minutes of the Kero absorbing, enduring, and returning fire without pause, without retreat, and without a moment of hesitation. The Kero sustained 214 hits during those 4 hours and 17 minutes. She lost Deck 9 to a sustained fire breach. She lost the port-forward sensor array completely. She lost secondary propulsion. Marcus kept primary propulsion running with engineering work that would later be described by a Coalition Technical Review Board as technically impossible given the damage sustained. She lost 14 weapon arrays out of 42. She lost the forward medical bay. Dr. Okafor moved his operations to the secondary medical bay on Deck 18 and continued working. She lost 19 crew members. 19 people who had chosen to serve on the slow ship. 19 people whose names Danny knew. 19 people who had heard every joke about the Kero and had stayed anyway. Danny received each casualty report in silence. He acknowledged each one. He did not stop giving orders. HFY. From this moment forward, the turning point came in the 3rd hour. The Vreth strike force had been reduced from 47 ships to 31 through the combined efforts of the Kero and Orin's defenders. But the remaining 31 were regrouping, finding new coordination, adapting to the chaos, and beginning to form a tighter, more dangerous cluster that would, if it were completed, allow them to concentrate fire on the Kero in a way that even 6 feet of composite armor might not survive. Priya saw it happening on her targeting display. "Captain," she said, "they're clustering. If they complete that formation, we'll take concentrated fire on the same hull sections. Even we can't absorb that indefinitely." "How long until formation is complete?" Danny asked. 11 minutes. Options. "I can break up the cluster if I concentrate all remaining weapons on the formation's anchor points, the 3 ships that are organizing the cluster around them. But I'll need full power to weaponize for 6 minutes. Nothing else. Define nothing else. No shields. No defensive systems. No damage control power allocation. Everything to weapons." The Kero remained a stationary target for 6 minutes, unable to defend itself against the Vreth's attacks, which broke up their formation before they could concentrate fire. Danny looked at the display. Marcus's voice came over the comm, "Captain. She can take it." Danny looked at Sophia. Sophia said, "She can take it." Danny said, "Lieutenant Nair, full power to weapons. Break that cluster." Priya said, "Aye, sir." Those 6 minutes were the longest 6 minutes in the history of the Kero. The Vreth, sensing the change in the Kero's defensive output, concentrated everything they had on her. Fire from 17 ships focused on a single target that was no longer spending any power on defense. The Kero shook. Not like a ship. It shook like a mountain during an earthquake. Deck 15 breached. Deck 16 partially breached. The starboard secondary hull plating buckled and cracked in 3 sections. The main bridge lost artificial gravity for 90 seconds. People grabbed consoles and railings and simply held on. 3 more weapon arrays went dark from impact damage. Dr. Okafor's secondary medical bay was treating patients faster than at any point in the entire engagement. He worked with quiet, focused speed, humming an old Earth song under his breath that no one around him could identify, and he didn't stop. Marcus was in engineering, running on nothing but adrenaline and decades of knowing exactly what sound each system made when it was about to fail, and what to do about it. He moved through his department like a conductor, keeping the reactor alive, keeping the power flowing, keeping the guns firing, and listening to the ship the way only he could. Lena Park, at navigation, held the Kero on course through impacts that would have sent a lesser ship spinning. She held it by the pure mechanical precision of her hands on the controls, steady, breathing, not looking up from her display. Ray Dominguez tracked the Vreth comms through it all, feeding targeting data to Priya in real time, updating the picture of the formation's anchor points as they moved and adjusted. Sophia stood at her console and managed the damage reports with a calm that she would not have been able to explain later. It was the calm of someone who had decided, at some deep level, that panic was not an option and had simply removed it. And Danny sat in his command chair and watched his ship fight and did not move. At 5 minutes and 40 seconds, the first formation anchor ship went dark. At 6 minutes and 2 seconds, the second went dark. At 6 minutes and 18 seconds, the third anchor ship, the largest vessel in the remaining Vreth formation, a heavy command cruiser, was hit by a concentrated burst from 8 of the Kero's remaining guns and fell out of formation, venting drive plasma from 3 locations, its command systems catastrophically disrupted. The cluster formation collapsed. The remaining Vreth ships, leaderless and disorganized, began to do what Vreth ships almost never did. They began to retreat. At hour 4, minute 17, Ray Dominguez said, "Captain, the Vreth strike force is withdrawing. All remaining vessels are executing FTL jump prep." A pause. "They're leaving." Silence on the bridge. Then Sophia said, quietly, "They're running." No one celebrated. Not immediately. They were too exhausted, too aware of what it had cost. Danny sat in his command chair in the gravity-restored but heavily damaged bridge of his ship, and he looked at the sensor display showing the last of the Vreth vessels jumping to FTL and disappearing. And then he said into the comm, "All hands, this is Captain Hale. Stand down from battle stations." We held. That was all he said. It was enough. Silence after battle is a specific kind of silence. It's not peaceful. It's not the silence of space or of sleep. It's the silence of people who have been running on adrenaline and fear and pure determined will for 4 hours and 17 minutes and have suddenly been told to stop and don't quite know how. It's the silence of people taking stock of what's still there. On the Kero, that silence lasted about 3 minutes. Then the damage control team started moving, the medical team started moving, and the ship, still floating, still breathing, still Kero, began the work of understanding what it had survived. The Kero had lost 19 crew members in the battle. Danny read each name aloud in the ship's log. He did not rush it. He said each name clearly, with full rank, and then he paused for a moment before moving to the next. It took 11 minutes to read all 19 names. Every station on the deck heard it. He did not give a speech. He did not talk about glory or sacrifice. He just said the names. Because the names were the point. Not the battle, not the victory, the names of the people who had given everything they had. When he finished, he closed the log and sat for a moment in his chair. Then he stood up and went to engineering to check on Marcus. Marcus was sitting on the floor of the main engine room, his back against the reactor housing, his eyes closed. He was not unconscious. Danny could see from the slight movement of his chest that he was breathing, consciously and slowly, the way someone does when they're trying to come back from somewhere very far away. Danny sat down on the floor next to him. They were both too old and too experienced to pretend that an explanation was needed. After a while, Marcus said, "She's still running." "I know," Danny said. "Port side runs hot. Still. Always." Marcus opened his eyes and looked at the reactor housing. "I thought, about 40 minutes in, when we were taking that concentrated fire, thought she was going to go." "She didn't."
No.
Marcus was quiet. "She didn't." He paused. "I lost 3 of my engineers." "I know," Danny said. More silence. "They knew what they were doing," Marcus said. "They knew exactly what this was. They chose it." "They did," Danny said. Marcus put his hand flat on the reactor housing, the gesture of a man touching something he loves. "She needs about 3 weeks in a repair dock," he said. "Minimum." "She'll get it," Danny said. "She earned it." In the medical bay, Dr. Okafor was still working. He had been working for 6 hours straight. He would work for 4 more before he slept. When Lena Park came to have a head wound from a falling panel scene too, he treated it with the same careful attention he gave to everything, and she found herself telling him, without quite meaning to, that she was from a small town in South Korea and she'd never expected to end up here, doing this work. Okafor said, without looking up from his work, "None of us expected to end up here." He smiled slightly. "That's what makes it matter." Priya was still at her weapons console when Sophia found her, 2 hours after the battle ended. She hadn't moved. She was staring at the engagement logs, running through the battle second by second, studying everything she'd done, looking for what she could have done better. "Priya," Sophia said. "I lost tracking on 7 targets in the 3rd hour," Priya said. "If I hadn't lost tracking, I could have broken up the cluster 20 minutes earlier. Which means we absorb less fire. Which means maybe." "Priya. Maybe some of the 19 are still." "Priya." Sophia's voice was quiet and firm. "Stop." Priya stopped. Her hands, flat on the console, were shaking slightly. "You held 47 ships with 28 working weapons arrays," Sophia said. "You broke their formation with 6 arrays in 6 minutes while we were taking the worst fire of the battle. You did everything any human being could have done with the tools you had." Priya was quiet. "HFY, Sophia said softly. "You proved them wrong. All of them." After a moment, Priya nodded. "Just once." She stood up from her console and went to get some sleep. Ray Dominguez wrote a message to his mother. He did this ritual after every engagement. It was his tradition, not a long message, just a few lines, telling her he was alive and thinking of her. He never sent them until they were back in communication range because operational security required it, but he wrote them in the moment, when the feeling was real. This time he wrote, "Mom, I'm okay. We did something today that I'll tell you about someday when there's enough time to explain it properly. The ship did it. The crew did it. I just listened. Love you." He folded the message neatly and put it in the queue for when they re-established comms. Then he leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes and let himself feel, for exactly 5 minutes, everything he'd been holding back for the past 4 hours and 17 minutes. Then he straightened up and went back to monitoring the sector, because there was always work to do. 6 hours after the battle ended, they re-established communication with the coalition. It was Sophia who made the call, a tight beam encrypted transmission to Admiral Chen's personal command channel, as Danny had directed. She transmitted a full battle report, all sensor logs, all signals intelligence, and all combat footage. Then she waited. The transmission delay at this distance was 11 minutes each way. Thus, it took at least 22 minutes to receive a response. She waited 34 minutes before the response came back. When it did, she read it twice before bringing it to Danny. Admiral Chen's message was 12 paragraphs long. The first paragraph confirmed receipt of the battle report and signals intelligence. The second paragraph said that coalition security had been notified and a full investigation into the Vreth conspiracy was underway. Multiple Vreth officials, both inside and outside the coalition, were being detained. The third paragraph said that the gap in the Vreth formation had been traced to a Vreth internal dissident, a junior admiral named Sailmira, who had been opposed to the conspiracy from the beginning and had built the gap into the formation as the only way she could think of to signal for help without being detected. She had heard, through internal gossip, about this slow human ship that had been mocked at the joint exercise. She had gambled that if anyone could use a gap that required passing through an area, no sane captain would take their vessel. It was the crew of the Kero. She had been right. The fourth paragraph reported the destruction or disabling of 23 out of the 47 Vreth warships in the battle. The remaining 24 were in retreat. Vreth's political leadership was in emergency session, with coalition representatives demanding a full accounting. The fifth paragraph said that Waypoint Station Orin was intact. All 9 coalition warships that participated in the defense survived, though they sustained varying degrees of damage. The sixth paragraph said that Admiral Chun was recommending the entire crew of the Kero for the Coalition Medal of Distinguished Action, the highest commendation available to any coalition military personnel. The seventh paragraph said that Admiral Chun was recommending Commander Daniel Hale for promotion to Admiral. The eighth paragraph was about logistics, repair orders for the Kero, crew rotation, and resupply. The 9th through 12th paragraphs were about the political aftermath, the coalition emergency session, the diplomatic response to the Vreth, and the processing of the signal's intelligence. But it was at the very bottom of the message, below the formal sign-off, in what was clearly a personal addition that Admiral Chun had added after the official text was complete, that there was one more line. Sophia read it to Danny. It said, "They said you were too slow. They were always measuring the wrong thing." Danny read the line twice. Then he folded the message and set it on his desk, next to the piece of paper he had pinned to the wall 6 years ago. Of SYMJHY, from this moment forward, we prove them wrong. He looked at both of them for a while. Then he went to find Marcus and tell him the Kero was going to a repair dock. Word travels fast in a fleet. Within 48 hours of the battle, the full story was being transmitted across every coalition channel: the signal's intercept, the Kalen drift transit, the 47 ships, the 4 hours and 17 minutes, and the 19 names. The coalition-wide response was not immediate. It moved through the fleet the way truth moves, first slow, then all at once. The Vreth soldiers who had invented the card game, waiting for the Kero, quietly stopped playing it. They were not stopped by any official order. No one ordered them to stop. They just stopped. They stopped because the joke had lost its effectiveness. Because the punchline had become something else entirely. The Orokai, who expressed admiration through formal documentation rather than open speech, published a 17-page strategic analysis of the Kero's engagement. It circulated widely. Its conclusion read, "The US Kero represents a category of strategic asset that has been systematically undervalued in coalition doctrine. The assumption that speed equals capability has been demonstrably and definitively refuted." From the Orokai perspective, that was essentially a standing ovation. The Dendari sent something more direct, a living wreath, grown from one of their own vessel plants, delivered to the Kero's repair dock with a single message: "You defended the whole coalition. We will not forget it." Admiral Sailvrex, the Vreth fleet commander who had made the joke about the Kero being a building that had gotten lost, sent a personal message to Danny Hale. It was not an apology, exactly. The Vreth did not really do apologies in the human sense. But it was something. It said, "I made an assessment based on metrics I believed were universal. I was wrong. I am adjusting my doctrine." Danny wrote back one line. "I appreciate that. The metrics we use determine what we can see." At Waypoint Station Orin, Commodore Vasquez held a small ceremony. It was not a large, formal coalition ceremony. Those would come later, with the medals, speeches, and political theater that followed any major event. The event was small. Just the crews of the 10 ships that had fought the battle. The Kero's crew consisted of as many members as could be spared from repair operations. The 9 other ships' crews. They gathered in Orin's main docking hall. Vasquez stood at the front. She didn't give a long speech. She said, 10 ships held this station against 47. The 9 ships at my back were brave and skilled, and I am proud to have served alongside them." She paused. But one ship came through the one place no one else could go, arrived at the moment we most needed her, and fought in a way that none of us had ever seen before. That ship was mocked and overlooked and counted out at every turn.
She looked at Danny.
Commander Hale, you brought the Kero here through the drift, in the dark, with no backup, relying only on a decoded signal and the belief that your ship and your crew were more than what the galaxy had decided they were. She raised her hand in a salute. Every person in the hall raised their hand. 3,200 human beings and the crews of 9 other coalition warships stood at attention. Danny stood at the front and looked at all of them. His crew, these people whose names he knew, who had stood in the path of 47 warships and held, and he felt something that he couldn't fully name.
It wasn't pride exactly. It was more specific than that.
It was the feeling of having asked people for something impossible and having watched them do it anyway. He returned the salute. He said simply, "This was the Kero. This will always have been the Kero." The 19 names were read again. All of them. By Vasquez this time, not Danny. She said each one clearly, with full rank and home city, because Vasquez believed that the place people came from was as important as who they were. Ensign Carlos Mendez, of Austin, Texas. Petty Officer First Class Amara Osei, of Accra, Ghana. Lieutenant Junior Grade Patrick Kim, of Seattle, Washington. And 16 more. The hall was silent for each one. Lena Park, standing with her navigation team at the back of the hall, thought about the Orakai offer she had turned down. The prestigious fleet, the advanced technology, the career that would have been, by any measurable standard, more impressive. She thought about the Kalen drift, the silver and gold river of particles, the low drum of impacts on the hull, and the feeling of moving through something that should have been impossible. She thought about standing at her station, holding the Kero on course, breathing. She thought, I made the right choice. Ray Dominguez, standing next to her, was thinking about the decoded signal, about the 23 seconds that had changed everything. He found it by running full-spectrum scans on decommissioned frequencies, just in case. He thought about Sailmira, the Vreth dissident who had built a gap into a formation and gambled that the one ship everyone laughed at would be the one ship that could use it. He thought, we found each other because neither of us gave up. Marcus Webb, standing near the front, was not thinking about anything in particular. He was listening, because in the docking hall, if you were quiet enough, you could hear the Kero in her repair dock, the low hum of her reactor, the sound of welding tools on her hull as the repair teams worked, and the soft groan of metal being made whole again. She was still talking. Marcus smiled. Good girl, he said quietly. 3 weeks later, when the Kero was in the repair dock and the formal coalition investigation was concluding, Danny was called to a debrief at coalition headquarters on Oran. The debrief was conducted by a panel of 7, representatives from 5 coalition species, Admiral Chun, and a Vreth representative named Admiral Sailvoran, who had opposed the conspiracy and was now helping coalition security dismantle what remained of it. They asked Danny questions for 4 hours. How did you find the signal? How did you decide to go dark? How did you know about the gap? How did you calculate the drift transit? How did you make the decision to concentrate weapons during the 6 minutes without defensive power? Danny answered everything precisely, completely, and without embellishment. At the end of the 4 hours, there was a pause. Then one of the coalition representatives, a Dendari elder named Rova Stillwater, said something unexpected. Commander Hale, I want to ask you something outside the formal record. Danny nodded. The Kero was assessed, after the joint exercise, as unsuitable for frontline duty. You had access to that assessment. You knew how the coalition viewed your ship. Yes, Danny said. And yet you chose to take her into the most dangerous engagement of this decade, alone, against 47 ships. Yes. Why? Danny was quiet for a moment. Because the assessment was measuring speed, he said. Speed, maneuverability, burst firepower. All the things the Kero didn't have. He paused. Nobody measured armor. Nobody measured sustained fire capacity. Nobody measured what happens when a ship has nowhere to run and just keeps fighting. Nobody measured the value of being able to go where others can't go because you're too well armored to be hurt by the route. He paused again. And nobody measured the crew, he said. A crew that has been told they don't matter has 2 choices. They can believe it. or they can decide to show everyone exactly how wrong they were. He looked around the table. My crew chose the second option. Every single one of them. That's not something any assessment captures. Rova Stillwater was quiet for a moment. You are describing a form of strength, the Dendari said, that does not appear on any instrument we use. Yes, Danny said. I know. After the debrief, as Danny was gathering his materials to leave, Sailvorin, the Vreth admiral, stopped him at the door. Sailvorin was old by Vreth standards and tall, and had the particular stillness of someone who had spent decades in high command. He looked at Danny for a moment with the analytical directness that Vreth always used in place of social warmth. He said, the junior admiral built the gap in the formation. Sailmira. She is being protected by coalition security now. She will not be harmed. Danny felt something release in his chest that he hadn't realized was tight. Good, he said. She gambled everything on the assumption that one particular human crew would see what she had hidden and know how to use it. Sailvorin paused. She told me, when we debriefed her, that she chose the Kero specifically. I know. She said she chose the Kero because she had watched the exercise. She had seen you, your crew, take that last place ranking without reaction. No anger. No complaint. She said that in the Vreth culture, someone who accepts humiliation without response is either broken or certain. He paused. She decided you were certain. Danny held the Vreth admiral's gaze. She was right, Danny said quietly. Sailvorin nodded once, a small Vreth gesture that Danny had learned, in 42 years of coalition membership, meant something close to respect. Then he walked away. Danny walked back to the Kero. She was in Dock 7, a massive repair cradle that held her while teams worked on her hull from every angle. She looked, from the outside, like something that had been through a war, which she had. The buckled plating, the sealed breaches, the scorch marks, they hadn't been cleaned yet. She was beautiful. Danny walked up the main boarding ramp and into her corridors. Quiet now, most of the crew was on leave, and the repair teams were mostly external contractors. His footsteps echoed in the half-empty passages. He walked to his quarters. He sat down at his desk. He looked at the 2 pieces of paper on the wall. Then he took a third piece of paper and wrote one more line. He pinned it below the first 2 items. It said, they were measuring the wrong thing. We always knew that. Now, they know it too. He looked at all 3 for a long time. Then he made coffee and sat in the quiet of his ship and waited for her to be whole again. The Kero was in the repair dock for 22 days. On the 23rd day, Marcus Webb signed off on her systems, every one of them, in the careful, thorough way he did everything, and told Danny she was ready. The crew came back in 1s and 2s over those 22 days. They came back from leave, from medical holds, and from the various administrative requirements that followed a major engagement. They came back the way the crew of the Kero always did things, without fanfare, without speeches, just showing up and getting back to work. Lena Park came back with a new set of navigation charts. She had spent part of her leave mapping additional transit routes through the Kalen Drift, finding 3 more corridors that the Kero could use that no other ship could follow. Ray Dominguez came back with a proposal for a new passive monitoring system, a network of microsensors that could be deployed along decommissioned communication frequencies to catch exactly the kind of signal he had found the first time. Priya Nair came back with 6 months' worth of updated targeting simulations that she had run obsessively during her leave, because she had promised herself she would never again lose tracking on 7 targets in the 3rd hour of an engagement. Dr. Okafor came back last, having spent his leave visiting the families of each of the 19. Not as an official representative, just as himself, sitting with people in their homes, telling them what their family members had been like aboard the Kero, what they had done in the battle, and that they had been seen and known and valued. He didn't tell Danny, he'd done the same. Danny found out from one of the families who wrote a letter to the ship. Danny read the letter in his quarters and set it on his desk beside the 3 pieces of paper. The formal coalition medal ceremony happened on day 20 of the repair period. It was everything a formal coalition ceremony was: large, elaborate, and covered by every media outlet in the known galaxy. 7 coalition ambassadors. Admiral Chun in full dress uniform. A Vreth honor guard, which was extraordinary enough that the media spent almost as much time covering that as the medal itself. The Kero's crew stood in formation in Oran's main ceremonial hall. 3,181 of them, 3,200 minus the 19 present in the 19 chairs left empty in the front row, each one with a name placard and a small photograph. Danny received the promotion to admiral. He accepted it quietly and without the lengthy speech the protocol expected. Commodore Vasquez, who had been promoted to rear admiral, leaned over to him during the ceremony and said quietly, "You're going to have to give up the Kero, you know. Admirals don't command individual ships." Danny was quiet for a moment. Then he said, equally quietly, "Watch me." Vasquez looked at him. He looked back. She smiled. "I'll see what I can do." In the end, through a creative interpretation of coalition naval regulations that several legal experts said was technically compliant, if somewhat aggressive in its reading, Admiral Daniel Hale retained active command of the U.S. Kero as a flag officer aboard, with the Kero designated a coalition fleet flagship, a status that had never before been assigned to a Titan-class vessel and required a special dispensation from the full Coalition Council. The Council voted on it. The vote was 11-0. On the day the Kero left the repair dock, she looked, from the outside, almost exactly as she had before the battle. 6 feet of composite armor plating. Solid.
Ugly.
Built like a mountain. Except for one thing. Marcus had quietly arranged, during the repair period, for a small modification to the hull. On the port bow, where the worst of the battle damage had been, where the plating had buckled and been replaced, the repair team had worked a pattern into the new plating. Not visible from far away. It is only visible up close, if you are looking. The pattern was a word.
Kero.
In letters 2 meters tall, pressed into the hull plating. Permanent. Danny saw it during the external inspection on the morning of departure. He stopped and looked at it for a long time. Then he put his hand flat on the hull, the way Marcus always did, and felt the low hum of the reactor through 6 feet of composite armor. She was warm. She was alive. She was ready. Admiral Hale, to all hands, prepare for departure. On every deck, 3,181 people moved to their stations. Lena Park at navigation. Ray Dominguez at communications. Priya Nair at weapons. Marcus Webb in engineering. Dr. Okafor is in the medical bay. Sophia Reyes at her console. Danny Hale sat in his command chair. The Kero's engines came up, that familiar low thunder, slightly warm on the port side, always, and she began to move. Out of the dock. Out into the open space of the Kalen sector, under the light of the twin stars.
Slow. Steady.
Unstoppable. On the coalition comm channels there was traffic. Ships were moving, exchanging coordinates, and giving orders. The ordinary business of a fleet. And then, on the broadband channel that every coalition ship monitored, the general frequency, the one everyone heard, a voice came through. It was a Vreth communications officer, young, by the sound of it, on a patrol ship somewhere in the sector. He said to his captain, clearly unaware that he was on the broad channel, "Sir, I have the Kero on sensors. She's moving out." And his captain said, "Where is she going?" And the young officer said simply, "Wherever she wants, sir. She goes wherever she wants." Danny heard it. His whole bridge heard it. Nobody said anything. But Sophia, at her console, was smiling. And Ray, at communications, was smiling. And Marcus, in engineering with his hand on the warm reactor housing, was smiling. And Priya, at weapons, was smiling. And Lena, at navigation, smiled as she set the course for wherever Admiral Hale decided they were going. And Danny Hale, in his command chair, picked up his coffee. He looked at the stars ahead of the Kero, the vast, open, uncharted dark. He thought about 90 names. He thought about a gap in a formation built by a Vreth admiral who had bet everything on a slow ship. He thought about silver particles and a river of light through the drift. He thought about Psi MJHY. From this moment forward, he said, quietly, to no one in particular, "Let's go." And the Kero went. Clapperboard the end.